unsettled by credible intel indicating that another round of NSAS protests are brewing in selected cities across the country, likely to commence this week, and possibly as early as Monday, the 7th of December, in other words, tomorrow morning. Every Nigerian should be worried by the specter of another nationwide protest, for any reason at all this time. Not only is it true that the whole nation is still sacrificed and much traumatized by the violent aftermath of the last round of protests, but ground zero has changed drastically, and rules of engagement this time around will no longer be the same. The last round of protests benefited from a police force subdued by embarrassment at the misdeeds of few of their colleagues, and simultaneously held in check by official directives, even from self-defense. Any further protest is likely to run into a police force still enraged by the vicious attacks visited upon her last time. Nigerians are aware of the gruesome slaughter and even cannibalism of at least 22 police officers during the violence that erupted alongside the NSAS protest. This is aside from the scores who were injured and maimed, in addition to the deliberate targeting and destructions of dozens of police stations and other police facilities, as well as the looting of high-caliber guns and ammunition from armories. These 22 police officers were our brothers, sons, husbands, and ultimately, they are Nigerians. While it is true that law enforcement should do her job professionally, irrespective of circumstances, it is even truer that official uniformed men and women who were universally hunted and killed across the country by the hoodlums can be unpredictable, even paranoid. In the face of these, and as the first sitting governor who publicly upheld the right of our youths to protest against police brutality, I cannot, in all good circumstances, agree that the time is right for another round of NSAS protests. Moreover, it seems to me that this is the time to consolidate on the gains of the last protest by participating fully in the various panels and bodies set up by the federal government or state governments to look into police brutality, identify perpetrators, and compensate victims. From what I have seen and from what I can see so far, progress is being made at the various panels. Not only are we seeing embodied and emboldened citizens coming forward with their stories of officers involved in human rights abuses, but such erring officers are being identified. No doubt, established offenders will be punished, just like the scores of the defunct SARS officers who have since been dismissed from the force and who may be further sanctioned. Youths have seats on these panels and have acquainted themselves with commendable humility and maturity. I therefore call on them to persevere in the process despite any perceived shortcomings. It is only unwise. Hunters who does not make time to roast or otherwise prepare what he took in hunting for consumption or commerce. I deemed another round of NSAS protests to be premature and counterproductive at this time. Apart from the higher likelihood of conflict, with the police earlier canvassed, we must also admit that the security situation in the country is very precarious at the moment. All patriots must therefore make conscious efforts not to degrade a perilous security situation further. Nationwide protests at this time will only overburden the load-bearing capabilities of our security architecture, increasingly the likelihood of total collapse. No matter the narrative, I doubt that out-of-control anarchy is an objective of the NSAS protest. It is also true that we live in an economy that is bleeding badly right now. Traditional responses to COVID-19 has hurt not just Nigeria, but all other countries of the world. Many have fallen into recession. To worsen matter, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, predicted 3 days ago that the pandemic could push the number of people living in extreme poverty to over 1 billion by 2030. Thank God they are owning up to my earlier predictions, warning and caution. Nigeria's earning and foreign exchange situation is too fragile as we speak to resist situation and protest any longer. Another nationwide protest will worsen the multidimensional poverty indices all over the country and work greater hardship on the ordinary Nigerians we claim to be advocating for. There are also socio-cultural implications. Nigerians tend to travel a lot during the Christmas days. Statistics shows that traveling this period is not only for pleasure, as widely supposed. For many of our people, this is the only time in the year when they can attend to pressing life responsibilities like marriages, hospital appointments, funerals of loved ones, and even community improvement events. As a governor, I am aware hundreds of such events will happen in towns big and small in my state and beyond. Many have been fixed for months, even years in advance, with much expenses already gone into planning. All of these will be in disrupt by nationwide protests at this time. And I passionately appeal to the great Nigerian youth not to be the harbinger of such much pain and loss to their compatriots, individual, families, and communities alike. Then, of course, we have socio-political reasons to tread carefully. We have the example of countries which have gone the path of chaotic social change, only to collapse as proof that action and caution are Siamese twins in the journey of all successful revolutions. Social justice is always going to be within a social context. In other words, we need to have a country to even protest for, a better one at all. Social change, like fire, must never be allowed to get out of control, or it will consume the very building it was ignited to warm in the first place, along with the occupants. In public protest, no variable is 100% guaranteed. Every protest can be hijacked. Like the NSAS protest, the recent Black Lives Matter protest against systemic racism and police brutality in the United States of America were largely peaceful. Yet, it was infiltrated by violent elements. These forced the leaders to frequently recalibrate their strategy in order to keep traveling towards the objectives. For instance, they have ceased fire since November 4th, no doubt, to give the electoral process a chance. I must also stress that when all is said and done, the fastest route to desired social change in a democratic system is via political process. The guarantee of periodic elections and change of guard in government is one reason never to burn it all down at once. Perhaps the most impressive thing about the US protests is how much they have utilized the ballot box in the year 2020. In 2016, about 135 million Americans voted in the presidential elections. In 2020, they are on course to overtake the 180 million mark. Majority of new voters are youth protesters. And mobilizing is very, very key. Currently, Black Lives Matter is actively participating and setting agenda in the Joe Biden's transition program because their role in his support cannot be denied. NSAS can do likewise, or even better. Pressure groups take political power when the pressure has built up to the point that they can no longer be refused or ignored. My administration has recently capitulated to the growing powers and participation of women in state politics by ceding all the 21 deputy chairmanship positions in all of our local government councils to them, along with the 21 council speakership positions. Nothing stops NSAS from achieving similar accommodation with our political parties. The good thing about a democracy is that if leaders push citizens to bring through a consistent pattern of substandard governance, citizens can always wait for the next election period to make a change. I can testify from my personal experience that a political system can only be comprehensively overhauled from within, and you can only do that when you take control of it as a legitimate and legal participant. It does not matter how much protesters ground the nation, they can never produce even a councillor outside the ballot box, which will be acceptable to the people. Thus, anger at social imbalance or poor governance manifested only through protest, whether peaceful or violent, will only achieve piecemeal objectives. Our NSAS protesters must therefore start looking and organizing themselves towards the 2023 general elections now, either by adopting an existing political platform or setting up one of their own. Contrary to perception, 2023 general elections are not far at all. If God keeps lives, we are only about 800 days away from February 2023, when all of this youthful energy can be harnessed and channeled properly for a true revolution via the ballot box. Then, there is more than enough work before the NSAS group. I therefore appeal to the Nigerian youth, especially the NSAS protesters, to rethink all plans for protest at this point. And indeed, before the panels have round off their assignments, such will be premature, dangerous, and above all, counterproductive to our stated gains, aims, and objectives. Men are still mourning the man beaten by death by the lizard with his small teeth. The leopard should not take money to go and sharpen his fangs, please. I wish all Nigerians the very best of this season. A Merry Christmas, peaceful and prosperous, healthy 2021. I thank you.